We are live here with the Black Motivation Broadcast. We are so extremely excited to have on our podcast, on our broadcast today, Dr. Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz. Thank you so much for joining us. We're about to have a party.
Are you kidding? I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Ashley. I appreciate your work. I appreciate what you do and how you do it.
Thank you. And so let's get into a little bit of introduction, right? So, an educator, expert communicator, poet, and love, life, and loss guru. Dr. Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz is a powerful voice in the education, literature, and activism spaces. She is an award-winning associate professor at Teachers College at Columbia University, and she also appeared in Spike Lee's Two Fists Up, We Gonna Be All Right documentary about the Black Lives Matter movement and the campus protests of Mizzou. Dr. Sealey-Ruiz, let's start from the beginning, shall we? What birthed in your spirit a love of education and a love of words?
What a beautiful question. I have to draw it back to probably growing up in the Bronx and seeing the way, probably retrospectively, the way that particularly Black boys were being treated. Because Black girls, we were sent into so-called gifted programs. We were given other opportunities.
Yes.
But the Black boys were not. They were put in special ed. They were being funneled. Actually, I didn't really understand the school to prison pipeline idea back then. So many brothers that I grew up with, they would just sort of disappear. And so seeing these inequalities, I think that is what was put in my spirit at a very young age. Because at the age of 13, that's when I knew I wanted to teach.
Yes.
So, I think it's just seeing the differences in the way that the boys were treated versus the girls. I couldn't articulate it, but I knew something wasn't right.
Right. So true. And, we see it on a day-to-day basis. And it really, like you said, it's tragic. How boys are ushered into sports and they're put in this box, right? And if they're not performing, then they're ushered into different avenues and they're not given the same opportunities.
Exactly.
As you mentioned. And then from there, you had a love of words, a love of education, and it developed, as you're mentioning now, into a lifelong journey of activism and fighting for culturally responsive education and diversity. And so talk a little bit about that. For those who are not familiar, what does that mean? Culturally responsive education, what does that encompass?
It's a matter of seeing every child where they are, right now. And really, since we've been in integrated schools, the curriculum is so Eurocentric. It's focused on whiteness, as is most things in this society, living in a white-dominated society. And we have over 50 years of research that tell us quite simply, when a child sees himself, herself, their self in a curriculum, that they are more open, they're more excited. That learning happens at another level. And so culture responsive education on a very simple level means to know who you're teaching and making sure that their life experiences and their ways of knowing is reflected in the curriculum. It is culturally responsive to who they are.
Yes, and it's not only important. I totally agree. It's definitely important, to see them in the literature, in what we're in our books, but it's also important to see it reflected in who's teaching as well.
Oh my God.
So I want to give your props and your kudos for being an educator and for the work that you do and how you devote your life to education and reform in education. And I just want to thank you for that.
Oh, Ashley, thank you so much. I appreciate you recognizing that. Thank you, sister.
For sure. And so what do you think are some key ways educators, as well as those responsible for certain decisions in higher education, have been working? What ways do you see them working to improve the culture and diversity and the opportunities for a more diverse landscape for students? Let's start there.
That's a great question. This is the work that I do, I would say, almost every day. So outside of being a teacher educator at Columbia University, I'm so fortunate to do work with K through 12 schools, also higher education, but across the country.
Yes.
And I'm trying to get them to get it right. And for me, getting it right means for them first to do some deep self-work around bias, around racism, around stereotypes. That's the first thing, that they have to be able to get it right. And then once we get it right, it's important that the curriculum, what you just mentioned, is reflective, right?
Yeah.
Of what is important to them and reflective of their lives. So there's a
Yes.
couple of things that have to be done. The teachers have to work on things. The curriculum has to be right. And then there are structures like teacher assessments. I don't want to get too much into the weeds.
Sure.
We can't make a whole bunch of superficial changes.
Mm-hmm.
And yet when teachers are being assessed, that the assessments are not culturally responsive.
Mm-hmm.
We really need to sort of gut out the system in some ways.
Right.
And make some major changes.
And so what can you tell us about a little bit of some of the changes, like maybe since the pandemic, that you've seen happen or seen occur in this area?
That's great. You know, quick, fast, and in a hurry, I always say, and I was saying this last night on a podcast, on a special event, that the first thing that went away, obviously, was testing, right? And testing, particularly with Black and Brown students, it just kills all creativity. Teachers are often teaching to test, and they're not teaching to the individuals in the classroom. So the standardized test, we saw that went away very, very quickly.
Wow.
And I hope that it stays away.
Yes.
I think we also saw, quite honestly, the level of inequity, the depth of inequity that was in the education system. Yes. And what I'm hoping is that when we return, that school leaders will think very, very, very carefully about how to close those gaps on the resources and the inequities, because it's a shame.
It is. And we definitely saw it with the lack of technology and them having to take the step up and really reach out to students in different economic backgrounds, not just one or another, across the nation. Right. Really, you saw, like you said, the inequity in our education system that was already being seen on a smaller scale, on an individual basis, and now it's a national thing because everyone's at home and having to work from home. And I want to thank everyone for joining us on the broadcast. Again, this is the Black Motivation Broadcast. We're here with Dr. Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and drop them in the comments, and we're going to address them as they come up. Yes, please. We're open to all your questions this evening, education related or not. Yes. And so let's talk about a fun topic, not necessarily education related, but still, education related. You were featured on Spike Lee's documentary, Two Fists Up, We Gonna Be All Right. So talk a little bit about that experience with us and, share a little bit about that with us. Oh my gosh. That was one of the highlights, I would say, of my life. And I'm also, even at this moment, it's almost 2 years, I think, when the film came out. I'm still in disbelief. I was at home one day, and I opened up my email, and it was at that time where email, you can open up and you can hear the voice memo or the message someone left you. So I get this message and it says, Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz is Spike Lee. I want to talk to you. And I didn't really pay attention. I'm thinking, is it a prank? For whatever reason, I did not take notice. Okay. Then I get another message. Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz. This is Spike Lee, the real McCoy. Give me a call back. So I remember going to the kitchen and playing it over and over for my mother. I said, do you think that's him? And she's like, yeah, that's him. Long story short, I called back. He was familiar with my work and wanted to interview me for the documentary. I also had an opportunity to bring in, at that time, a doctoral student who's now an incredible doctor in her own right, Dr. Jamila Liscott. Definitely look up her work. And Patrick Williamson, who was a master's student. So they were interviewed at different times, but it was incredible working with him. He's an incredible interviewer. He made me feel at ease. And you see, I don't have a problem talking. Not at all. So he would ask a question and I just opened up, and I'm grateful because, you use the word feature, and that's interesting because there were, one or two people, they were there maybe one time or two times. I mean, he had me appear in the documentary about 5 times. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. I'm glad that he saw what I had to say was worthwhile, that he stitched it throughout, his film. For sure. It was a great experience. And speaking of having to say something worthwhile, let's get into this book, Miss Lady. Love from the Vortex, your book of poetry. First of all, I loved the poetry in the book. It spoke to me on several different levels. at several different points, right? So
Yeah.
let's get into this book of poetry, which really speaks to the decisions and the mindset of a woman who's exploring herself in relation to the how she gives, how she receives love, as well as how she interprets, the stages of loss
Yeah.
and of life in relation to love. And so, talk about some of the main themes of the book with us. Share some of that you wanted to cover when you started creating the book.
First of all, what a beautiful way of putting that. Thank you, Ashley, so much. Because there is loss. There is a lot of love in there as well, but
Yes.
it is loss and being able to deal with the ending of relationships. And I
Yes.
want to say that I did not intend to write a book. This book literally wrote itself. I have been writing poetry all my life, although I just called myself a poet maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But
Right.
poetry has always been the way that I made sense of the world, the way that I understood what was happening in my home, the way that I shaped the world that I wanted to live in. And so Love from the Vortex, the poems in the first 2 sections are really poems from years ago, from someone, Joseph, the section, clearly the angel section. I do want to say this to the viewers, that those are not real names. Those are pseudonyms.
Right. Yes.
So the men chose their own names. And that's important to say because, I am a researcher in my professional life, but I also respect the privacy. And this was about my story and not about me outing someone, right?
Yes.
And so I let them know that the book was forming and I asked them, okay, choose a name. So I just want to say that the men chose their names.
Nice. I like that. That's different. I've never heard that. Yeah.
And it felt natural, Ashley. I want to say it felt natural. And this is how I try to live my life. I try to live my life being fully present, to be authentic to who I am and what's happening to me. So it felt like the right thing to do. But the book really, the last 4 chapters, take place during the last 4 years and the 4 relationships that I had within those years. And I was just trying to, quite honestly, understand what was happening to me.
Right. Yeah. What was going on in those relationships in that span of time with those people?
With those people, why was I not loving myself in the way that my mother raised me to love myself?
Right.
Why was I settling for less? All of that. And it came out through the poetry. And I'm just so glad that it came together in the way that it did, because so many people have written and told me how it has been, to use a biblical reference, it's been balm in Gilead for them. It has been solace for them. It has, particularly through the pandemic, it has really helped them get through some difficult times. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yes, you speak on, like I said, you speak on love, you speak on life, you speak on loss, and those are like evergreen topics, right? Everyone can relate to them. They will always be relevant, right? And so I'd like to ask you a quick question about how you feel like the racial landscape of, like how Black people interact, right? Women and men, especially since the pandemic, because we are talking about the last 4 years in the last couple of sections of the book. How do you feel like Black women and men need to come together in relationships and really build a bridge now, especially when it relates to love and including loss? But let's focus on love right now.
Wow, that is such a brilliant question. And I want to say, and I've been noticing, because I've been traveling in different spaces where brothers are holding, like Zoom spaces.
Yeah.
And brothers are talking about healing. Brothers are talking about the way that they need to, honor their queens. I think there's been such a beautiful resurgence of our consciousness among some of us. Some of us have been conscious, all the time,
a little bit now.
right? But I'm loving, during this pandemic, the way that we lift each other up. And I try to be very deliberate in doing that. When I'm on Twitter, when I'm in, the Twitterverse or IG or any place on social media, I make a point to say publicly that I love my sisters, that I love my brothers. And I've been seeing a lot of that. And I do believe with some of the videos that I've been watching, particularly Black partners and husbands and wives,
Black love.
Talking about Black love, talking about what that means, that Black love is a revolutionary act. Because when you live in a society that tries to destroy your very core and destroy your family structure, including your relationships, Black love is a revolutionary act. And to see brothers, on YouTube, becoming these relationship experts,
Yes.
trying to talk to sisters and brothers about how to treat each other right.
Yes.
That has really blossomed over the
It
pandemic.
has.
So I think we're going in the right direction for that.
We are. We're starting to see more of the TikTokers, like you said, more of the YouTubers, more people who are in a position to presenting information that would help Black love,
Yes.
will encourage Black love.
That's right, right. Which has always been there. And quite honestly, Ashley, and you know this from being in media, the
Yes.
media has depicted our relationships as dysfunctional. And
Right.
sometimes what happens when you see an image over and over and over, it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
So the media is very, very powerful. When you're disrespecting Black women in the media, and men consume that, it can become the way that they interact. So
Right.
we have to understand the
Become normalized.
Normalize a role of media. It's kind of always been between the bed sheets, if you will,
Yeah.
in our relationships. And I'm glad with our rising consciousness, we're rejecting that.
Exactly. And as speaking of from a love poet perspective, someone with your immense, awesome background, can you share a little bit with us, about the journey of a poet and what advice you would have to give to somebody who is either thinking about entering into this space of, publishing their works or, already in the space and would like to get out more like you are?
Right. Thank you. I would say, write what your heart tells you to write. Don't write for publication. Don't write to be recognized. I mean, this book is extremely vulnerable. I spill the tea, the coffee, the wine, whatever's to be spilled.
All of
Actually, it's all there.
Yes.
And so that's why I say I didn't intend to sit down and write a book. Who would want to put, as we would say in our community, so much of your business in the street?
Yeah.
But I realized that it was a liberation project for me.
Yes.
And I said that, wow, I remember saying to myself, this is healing me. And the way that this is healing me, then I know that it must be able to offer healing to someone else.
Yes.
And that's why I released it. So I wrote it really to free myself, to understand what was going on.
Yes.
And so you've got to be authentic in what you're writing and not trying to write for fame or notoriety or to get on a podcast, with Ashley J. Like, write because your heart is telling you it must come out.
Yes, so true. And I'm a poet in my former life. I still occasionally write poetry.
Once a poet, always a poet.
Once a poet, always a poet. Okay, we're gonna keep it there. And as a poet, you are a poet's poet. I definitely appreciate, how you share and what you shared. And it's, beautiful to see how, like you said, you aired your quote unquote dirty laundry, but you exposed in exposing your life, you're healing others.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. No, they've said it. I'm grateful. There's nothing more rewarding for an artist, whether it's a visual artist, a musical artist, a poetry or a poet, to have someone consume what you wrote and to say, wow, this helped to heal me.
Yes.
So that has been the gift that keeps giving. Every email, every voice memo, every time someone picks up the phone to say or sends a text, you don't understand. I just read this poem and this is what it did for me.
Yes.
I don't think an artist can ask for anything more.
They can. It's the ultimate homage to you and, your work for sure.
Thank you, Ashley.
You're welcome. And so if you could go back in time to the beginning of your career, right? What would you tell yourself? What advice would you have to give? What would you share with yourself knowing what you know now?
Trust yourself. Trust yourself, even when it seems like you're going off the beaten path, because I did not arrive where I am. I spent 13 years in corporate America. I started working very young when I was in high school. It used to be this thing called the co-op program because I felt the pressure to try to make money to help my family. And so I started working 1 week and then going to school 1 week. So I was introduced to corporate America at a very young age. And it was a little bit traumatizing, I have to say. Little Black girl from the South Bronx, kind of schlepping down on Wall Street and not really understanding what was happening, at the age of 16. But I think that allowed me to be more flexible. And so after college, I went into corporate America right after college, but I knew that I wanted to be a teacher from the time I was 13. So I started teaching at night. And that fulfilled me. So what I would tell my younger self is to trust yourself, even when it feels the path is going in different directions, all of those roads lead to exactly where you need to be.
Hey, I like how you put that. All of the roads that you took on the journey that you were going on led you to the perfect moment to be where you are today.
Absolutely.
Exciting, beautiful thing, for sure.
Absolutely.
And so we have now arrived at a new section of the Black Motivation broadcast, a fun portion where we have our rapid fire.
Wait, no, actually, this entire interview has been fun. You are phenomenal. So,
thank you.
Yes, I'm having a great time.
So amazing. Well, I'm glad you're having a great time. And we're going to get to a great portion, which we call the rapid fire question portion. We have 4 questions. You have 5 seconds in order to answer these questions. They are either or questions. Are you ready?
I think I'm ready. Yes.
I think you're ready too.
I'm ready.
So first question, SWV or Escape?
Ooh, SWV.
Terry McMillan or Toni Morrison?
Ooh, Auntie Tony.
Ketchup or mayonnaise?
Ketchup.
Lemon pepper wings or barbecue wings?
Lemon pepper wings.
There you go, to my own heart. Prince or Michael Jackson?
I can't choose on that one, sis. Do I have to choose?
Gotta choose. Last question. Prince
MJ.
or Michael Jackson?
MJ.
MJ. All right, so I'm gonna take a second to dissect the questions. We had recently had one of the best verses, in my opinion. On Sunday, we had SWV and Escape. So why did you choose Escape?
I was there, and I'm very active in the chat on Versus. You know, I'm like a member of a Club Quarantine with D9,
yes, with D9.
And so I'm active. And I have to tell you that I just said it was a tie because, first of all, the sisters are dope. Yes. And both the groups, their music helped to shape my growing up, my relationships, my understanding of the self. So it's really hard to choose. But if I had to, I think that SWV, you know, I vibed more with them for some reason growing up. I knew the lyrics to all of their songs. I knew when their albums were dropping. You know, Coco with her long nails. I didn't want to be Coco with her long hair, her long nails. So I think, you know, it's just that their vibe was something that I aspired to. And Escape, I kind of saw them as like the little sisters, you know, when they first came out. But SWV, these were like the women, you know, that I wanted to be. So I think that's why I chose SWV.
Awesome. And then you chose Miss Toni Morrison. So why did you choose Miss Toni Morrison over Terry McMillan?
And, you know, I've taken courses with Terry McMillan, and she's an incredibly dope thinker and writer and teacher. Yeah. Toni Morrison fellowships with our ancestors on the page in a way that I have seen no other writer do that. And she writes unapologetically about Blackness. She centers the Black gaze. She centers our lives. You know, our lives exist beyond a white gaze. And Toni Morrison has spent everything she's written affirming Black people and our ancestors.
So true. Enough said. Enough said.
I dropped the mic on that one, Ashley.
That's the mic. And then ketchup or mayonnaise? For me, this is an easy question, but I have gotten mayonnaise. So I had to ask you, why did you choose ketchup?
It's easy for me too. I'm allergic to mayonnaise.
There we go. Point blank period. That's what it is. And then lemon pepper wings or barbecue?
Oh, that's easy because I love lemon. I eat lemon like off the hull. You know how you eat lemon? Put lemon in my water. Lemon is in everything. And I cook with pepper. Everything that I make, I cook with garlic and I cook with pepper. So those are my 2 favorite ingredients together. How could I not want lemon pepper wings?
There we go. That's it. Mic drop again. Bam. And then we made you choose between Prince and Michael Jackson. We made you choose, and you chose MJ. So share a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was hard because when both Michael Jackson and Prince passed away, I remember exactly where I was, in the same way I remember where I was when Marvin Gaye passed away. You know, I was hanging out on the street corner. We had the boombox. It was a bunch of my friends, and his death came over the live wire. So, you know, Michael Jackson probably more because his career is extended longer, with the
Yes,
Jackson 5. So I
right.
feel like I've grown up with his music, and therefore
Yes.
I can remember moments in like the soundtrack of my life.
Yes.
There's more Michael Jackson songs on that
Makes
soundtrack
sense.
than Prince. Prince comes into my life a little bit later when I start understanding love and
Right.
heartbreak. Michael, kind of sang from Humanitarian.
Yes.
Just a whole different
Vibe
altogether.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, unfortunately, we have reached the end of this week's episode, your special featured episode. But we do have 2 more questions. The first of which is, what words of motivation would you like to leave our audience with on your special episode of the Black Motivation Broadcast?
Blackness is dope. Don't ever forget it.
Yes. Just yes.
Yes, that's it. That's all I got.
That's all we need.
That's all we need.
Yes. And so where can we find, follow, and support you, your book, everything that you're doing on social media and the web?
Thank you. I on Twitter @Ruiz Sealey, @RuizSealey, on IG Yoli YOLIE _Sealey-Ruiz. That's on IG. I'm an OG. I'm on Facebook. I have a poetry page and a regular page. But the book is on Amazon, as will be a new book, that's dropping this summer called The Peace Chronicles. Now that I'm out of the vortex and I've experienced peace, and what my goal is to be available in more Black and Latinx bookstores. And I'm working with a special someone on trying to get that happening. But in the meantime, it's available on my website, YolandaSealey-Ruiz.com, or on Amazon.com.
Well, y'all need to check out this book. You know, to follow her on everywhere you can possibly can. Follow her, support this lady, because she is the definition of Blackness is dope. And I want to thank you so much for being on this episode and being here with us and sharing your knowledge and your testimonies.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy.
You're welcome. This has been Ashley J on the Black Motivation Broadcast, interviewing Dr. Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz. And y'all, we are out. Thank you so much for joining us.